The Jim Jones trial has altered drastically, but you won't believe what you're going to hear next. In court, Camron revealed something shocking that would damage Chrissy Lampkin's career. Everyone thought Jim Jones was at the center of the trial. But however, the world is about to learn Chrissy's startling truth, which has been kept a secret from everyone. The irony is that Jim Jones might now from everyone. This case involves more than simply Jim Jones. It also involves Chrissy's reprisal. What follows, do you think is just another trial? You're totally wrong. This drama isn't only happening on the streets. This time, the repercussions are too severe to overlook. Camron just delivered a bombshell that no one saw coming amid all of the commotion surrounding Jim Jones, who is facing accusations that might ruin his reputation. Imagine the world halting as the courthouse door opens, all eyes on the year's most anticipated trial. The individual typically voiced his thoughts and stirred up controversy. But his revelation on Chrissy Lampkin was surprising because it went beyond Jim Jones. The purpose of the courtroom was to discuss, formed the setting for a far larger drama and controversy. And Camron was the one who came up with the idea that Chrissy was revealing secrets that no one knew existed, a tale that has dared to be told thus far. To put it in perspective, Jim was the focus of attention during this trial, and his presence was well known. His company was beset by legal troubles. His reputation was tarnished. And allegations that he was involved in a series had already cast doubt on Camron's commitment to the business, his financial transactions, and of course, the legendary Dipset image that Camron and the others had meticulously constructed. But in the courtroom, an unforeseen circumstance occurred. The court abruptly veered away from focusing solely on the charges against Jim Jones, when Camron, in the more important than any of us ever thought. What could be more tense than the conflict between Jim Jones and Camron? Well, the story takes a crazy turn at that point. Jim, also known as Chrissy Lampkin, many would be shocked by the series of events that began when Camron abruptly and dramatically revealed all in that courtroom. For years, Jones's long-eyed partner and the reality TV personality had been concealing something so unpleasant and private that her hidden past suddenly came to light when Camron accused her of acting in a dubious manner. The accusation against Chrissy, the person who has supported her, was clear. And the tension in the courtroom was apparent. Camron said that Chrissy had been secretly working with some people that Jim was unaware of, going beyond simply hinting that she was involved in questionable financial activities. For a long time, Jim's side had been playing both sides of the argument. Why did Camron choose to reveal this startling information at the trial of Jim Jones? What motivated Camron to make this public statement? About the missinses of the crew? Or was there another reason? Everyone appreciated their connections and dedication to one another. And the music industry was setting trends in producing memorable moments. But behind the surface, there were imperfections, and those cracks were beginning to show. Having a turbulent relationship with Jim, Camron had long remained quiet about the internal strife at Dipset. But now, during Jim's trial, he saw a chance to find out about Chrissy's role in something far more serious that would have played a part in Jim's downfall, beyond Chrissy's private life. Camron's revelation of this secret included members of a criminal network who have been dragging how Chrissy felt about it. All must be a mystery to you. Everything might be destroyed by the strings behind the scenes. And this revelation. Both Jim Jones's prior fan loyalty and his standing in the music industry are in jeopardy. This is more than simply a trial. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's think about the significance of Camron's bombshell. Was she taken by surprise? Was she always involved in the plot? Or is this story more complex than anyone wants to admit? Since this is about betrayal, secrets, and loyalties that are being questioned in the most public way possible, we must ask questions like, how far did this conspiracy go? What was Chrissy's in these shady dealings? How does this affect the relationship between Chrissy and Jim? Will their relationship and personal lives become irreparably divided as a result of this trial? Jim Jones never even realized he was a pawn in a much bigger game. We haven't even skimmed the surface yet, but we're holding on tight because of their entire public image. Whether Jim has been involved in a disagreement, if Chrissy is the one who drew him in, or whether she is just a victim of circumstances, we're going to delve deeper into the consequences of Camron's confession. And believe me, it's going to get much more explosive. The courtroom was in disarray following his bombshell admission, which the entire globe watched. Bewilderment, Chrissy, Lampkin, who had been Jim Jones' rock for years, was caught in the middle of a storm she had not expected. It wasn't more profound ties, underground connections. And this is where things become really unpleasant. So let's analyze the covert agenda that was being exposed after being depicted as the loyal wife who never wavered in her support of her husband. Chrissy was now the focus of serious charges that Camron wasn't actually. He was making unfounded accusations and talking about actual relationships with dangerous people who could destroy lives with a simple phone call, but Chrissy was allegedly associated with them. Chrissy had allegedly been working in secret. People from Jim Jones's former followers who worked covertly and dragged threads in the criminal, corrupt, and dishonest environment. The fact that Jim Jones was ignorant of Chrissy's association with these questionable people and the secrets she had divulged to them was even more startling. Camron said that Jim Jones had not been informed of Chrissy's actions. Camron depicted a man who had been oblivious to love and royalty. But now that everyone save Jim was aware of Chrissy's secret existence, let's go back in time and wonder why a woman who had spent years by Jim's side would suddenly become engaged to the people who had destroyed him. The worries were growing more urgent. Was it all a hoax, or was there something darker at work? Let's discuss how the people reacted to this, because the media, fans, and even those closest to these superstars begin to ask questions when something like this occurs. Those that watched were the supporters who had previously backed Jim and Chrissy and believed they were the perfect marriage. When the fans learned that Chrissy was allegedly involved in this situation, what do you suppose they were saying? Shouldn't they have been incensed upon seeing it? With their every action on reality TV, everything was now up for grabs. Even though Jim, the rapper, had always been their guy, according to those purportedly close to the matter, he stayed loyal and true. But suddenly he was being drawn into something far larger than he could have ever dreamed. Numerous others accused Chrissy of exploiting Jim for personal benefit. Some even went so far as to imply that she had been secretly working against Jim while utilizing his fame and reputation to further her career. Startling and hurting people who had earlier cherished the partnership and leaving them wondering, is this what does it mean to be truly loyal? Furthermore, the media should not be disregarded. While some media outlets were keen to present Chrissy as a gold hunter, others accused her of using Jim's strings as a puppet master to further her own agenda behind the scenes. But in reality, no one knew what to make of the story's hourly changes and apparent complexity with each new development. But things take a turn for the worst at this point, because Camron didn't just blame Chrissy. No, he went far further and began disclosing some really private information. According to Camron, Jim was not only ignorant of Chrissy's actions, but also of her difficulties. According to Camron, Jim Jones had been making bad decisions for years, engaging in questionable activities, and hanging around with individuals who were solely interested in taking advantage of him. Camron boldly exploited the names of well-known businesses that you wouldn't normally identify with Jim Jones in an attempt to obtain their own. Jim had a relationship with these individuals that went beyond simple commercial dealings. These names weren't only. Camron claimed that Jim had been surrounded by people who had misled him and guided him down a route that would undoubtedly lead to catastrophe, which was actually right outside his door. This was both a personal and professional matter, and even more startling is instead of just discussing these links in general terms, Camron gave precise information on Jim's level of involvement, demonstrating that Jim had been a part of these activities for years, but had never been aware of it either due to ignorance or for some other reason. Denial or outright contempt, Jim was now dealing with the fallout from his own decisions and deeds, which were related to the same individuals Chrissy had been covertly collaborating with. Think about that for a second. Being active in something is one thing, but it's another. Completely when you find out that the people you were closest to and trusted the most were guiding you into this disaster, which is exactly what Camron was doing. He seemed to be saying that Chrissy's betrayal was both personal and professional. And Jim, as the courtroom drama unfolded, it became evident that this was about more than one individual. And the stakes were larger than anyone could have imagined. It was he who had become embroiled in a game he was unaware he was playing and blinded by love. Jim's career was not the only thing at risk in this case. As the courtroom drama developed, it became evident that the failure of an entire organization was at stake and that the stakes went much beyond a personal disgrace. The industry was watching, the fan base was in disarray, the entire empire they had built was being torn apart. And the legal repercussions, whether it was Chrissy Lampkin's private affairs coming to light or Jim Jones's public image being damaged, were just starting to show. In actuality, this topic is being avoided by everyone, as it was a career time bomb that was going to explode rather than merely a personal matter. Observing the couple's relationship when Camron shared the information, Jim Jones was not only a rapper but also a leader in the hip-hop industry and a cultural icon. He was now involved in a legal nightmare that might change everything. A whole brand was collapsing and dirty laundry was being broadcast. Lawyers were on high alert when press reports emerged, hoping that they contained not only slanderous rumors but also concrete details about Jim's prior connections to the suspicious people who were allegedly linked to the money trails and the possibility of criminal responsibility were all beginning to surface, and who could ignore the federal investigations that began to surround the case. Jim's previous contacts had previously attracted the attention of law enforcement, especially after government officials. According to Camron's sources, how did this affect Chrissy and Jim Jones? The most evident consequence was the possibility of legal disputes. Jim and Chrissy could be subject to severe legal consequences and were investigating possible more serious criminal activity, money laundering, and racketeering. Jim could have been brought down by his relationships with the wrong people and his failure to act on the warning signs, regardless of whether he was actively participating in illicit activities. However, there was something that made him susceptible. 2 years in prison if things didn't work out. In this instance, the public outrage was far more important. The company had already started to turn against them. Former partners were splitting up, brands were putting up barriers. And there were reports going around that no one wanted to be connected to the sinking ship, and young brands were the only ones harmed by this trial. Businesses and networks that had long been connected to Jim and Chrissy were compelled to consider the difficult decision of whether or not to continue supporting them following when the truth hit hard. Sponsors and partners began calling, and many individuals were cutting their connections because they were afraid of how widely known it would be. Whole reputations are at stake for someone like Jim Jones, who was previously invincible in the hip-hop industry. Partnerships and sponsorships with some of the most well-known figures in the field. The strain was increasing, and Chrissy's health was not improving. She had already been called the ultimate villain by the media, and her alleged hidden life was now overshadowing Jim's years of devotion and support. She was also facing backlash from industry insiders. In a terrible turn of events, fans started accusing her of using Jim and using their relationship as a launching pad for career, casting doubt on her loyalty and good intentions. The same individuals who had formerly lauded Destiny's strength now viewed her as a crafty, icy woman who had been playing a long-term game. The drama started as soon as Camron opened his mouth, and let's not even discuss him. On Camron, who was notorious for his harsh words and unbridled manner. Camron was undoing all Jim had started, not just exposing Chrissy or giving up. Let's think about the possible legal consequences for a moment. Chrissy may have been charged if she had been linked to the wrong gang. Was Camron attempting to shield Jim from a reality he was too blind to perceive? Or was he genuinely seeking retribution? She faced major felonies that may result in years in prison, including conspiracy, fraud, and possibly racketeering. Jim's situation was more complex. Due to his ties to known criminals, he might face indirect charges. The fact that Jim was entangled in a web of unlawful activity that he may not have even been aware of was a terrible reality. But the law doesn't always care that ignorance isn't an excuse. What about the catastrophe that was public relations? Jim's loyal followers were starting to doubt everything, as it was obvious that he was no longer the untouchable man he once was. Now for the final question. The rapper, who was once a hero to many, had to cope with the consequences of his betrayal and secrets. Do Jim and Chrissy have a chance to rebuild their lives, careers, and marriages after everything that has been made public? Or is this the end of an era? However, one thing is certain. This trial controversy and the subsequent disclosures will, although Jim Jones' name will always be linked to one of the most horrifying events in hip-hop history. The narrative is far from finished. The fans are still left to deal with the aftermath of the ongoing legal disputes and judicial drama. Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampkin's future is uncertain, but we are left with the repercussions. The truth has been exposed and there is no going back. This is the awful reality of Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampkin's failing company. But what will become of them next? Will their career as we know it come to an end? Or will they be able to continue? More significant than the incident itself will be the legal fallout. And more significantly, how far will these consequences actually extend? Since this is an emerging subject you don't want, please leave a comment below so that we don't miss what happens next. Is there more going on here than meets the eye? Or do you believe Camron tried to hurt Jim's career on purpose? Remember to like this video if you want to hear your opinions on this important subject. Horrified by these disclosures, and share them with your friends to make sure since everyone is aware of the truth. Stay up to date on all the breaking news as we continue to find more stories like these arouse people. Alerts to make sure you don't miss any amazing now. This is only the eye have much more to learn. Many thanks for viewing. Until the next occasion, keep up your peeled their eyes since, in the affirmative, the reality of the celebrity drama industry fictional action is invariably stranger.